and welcome to another episode of 50 Shades and Grey, the show that is occasionally scripted, and we hope you enjoy it. So, today I'm going to talk about life changing moments or sliding doors moments. So, I don't know if you ever remember that film. I think it was about a 90s film, maybe an 80s film, where the guy was getting off the train and there was that moment where his life went in one direction and it could have gone in another direction. And what the film does, it shows you both directions where his life could go. And that got me thinking about a lot of things, actually, about our lives growing up, and if there were any of those sliding door moments that you had in your life. Were there moments where you look back on now? And I think as we get older, which we all are all the time, we just don't seem to realize that until we get maybe in towards past 50s, I guess, maybe sometime like that. But when you're in your is and your 30s, I think your concept of time, because you've got it all there, it's a little bit like gambling. If you're sitting at the gambling table and you've got loads and loads of chips, it's fine. You can gamble away. You can lose a few chips here and there. And it's not until you get down to those last few chips that you start biting your nails and then thinking, oh, I need to win this one. I need something to go right. And I've found that as I've got older, I've probably started to appreciate time a lot more. And especially looking at how life is, and maybe it's a hangover from our parents and their parents, because I know when I grew up, I was encouraged, let's say, very quickly, as we all were, to, you must get a house, go and get a house, get out and get yourself a house, which I did in my early 20s, because a great investment is bricks and mortar, obviously. And over time, it's been one of those investments that, is always guaranteed. If you stay in it for long enough, you'll always get your money back. So I did that. But looking back, what I think now is that probably stopped me doing a lot of things in life where it may have taken my life in another direction and ending up in a different place. And I'll come to that. But the reason is because I think once you buy a house, once you have a house, you get used to a certain standard of living, your own space, and then you're on that wheel there of where you want that and you feel like you need that. Whereas when you was at home living with your parents, you just had your room and you didn't think about it. You had freedom. You could go out and you could do what you want. You could go off for 6 months, 7 months if you wanted to, and then just come back again. And I guess you couldn't have done that unless your parents had a home. So that's the caveat of this conversation, is that by having a home, you sort of provide a place, I guess, as you get older, for your kids to return to. And I know my two brothers and myself, at different periods of our lives, I think we probably went back to my mum's a couple of times each, maybe through breakups, divorces, you know, moving house and interim periods and all those things. But I did find that I gave up a lot of opportunities because I was committed to the bills, committed to the house. So, and I'll give you an example of that. I had a chance to go to a really, really good university to go back and do some further study. And I was invited back to this university, which was Loughborough at the time. And mostly because of my football, because I was playing at the time, and an opportunity arose through speaking to someone, applying for a course, that I could have gone back and had done another course. But when I looked at it financially, I wasn't going to be able to pay my mortgage, and that would have meant losing the house. And at the time, I was just committed to that. I often wonder, if I look back now, what would have happened? And again, because of football, I mean, football took me to and gave me a lot of opportunities. So I went out to America. I did a scholarship when things didn't work out for me. Here with football, I was offered a scholarship to go out there, and I got a full ride, which was, fantastic. And even back in the 1990, when that was, it was worth a lot of money, because my education was paid for the next sort of 4 years. And I went out there and I thought it was going to be a fantastic experience because of football. The experience was fantastic, but the football side of it just wasn't for me. And I ended up coming home because two or three things happened out there, and I ended up coming home earlier than I planned to. And that's one of those sliding door moments for me where I thought, and the reason that I came home was purely football based. It was nothing else. It was purely that the football out there for me was of a standard where it just wasn't getting any better. It was the same standard. I thought I'm going to be playing the same standard for the next 4 years, so I'm going to fall way behind of where I thought I could get to and where I wanted to get to. And I thought by staying there for 4 years, it just wouldn't help me. I didn't look at my education is being paid for the next 4 years, and I'm going to have a great time. I was so obsessed with football that I decided to come back to the UK. Now, for me, that was probably my biggest sliding doors moment where I thought, I wonder where that could have gone. Wonder where my life would have gone if I'd have stayed there. Maybe I wouldn't have come home again. Maybe I'd have stayed out there. And, maybe my life had gone in a different path. But it's funny though that I think all these things that you look at, and it could be a guy, it could be a girl, it could be a relationship that you had, it could be a job opportunity that you didn't take, it could have been being offered a job when you was on holiday and then deciding that you know you should go home because you needed to be near your parents because families are always a big draw, aren't they? Families are always such a big draw. And the old saying that you can choose your family, you can choose your friends but you can't choose your family is so true, because there's things that you put up from you put up with from your family that you'd never put up with from family can do the most awful things to you, but you get through it eventually, I think, somehow and some way, whereas friends can do things that aren't anywhere near as bad, but you just think, I'm not putting up with that. I don't need to put up with that. And I think that's the thing. I think you have to put up with with a lot of crap from family that you just don't need to put up with from friends. So I think you fall in and out of friendships, and unfortunately, you don't fall in and out with family unless it's severe. Obviously, there are always cases, and I know myself, there's always cases where you probably think, yeah, we're not going to get through that. That's never going to be the same again. But I think those sliding door moments, do they haunt you? Do you ever look back and think at night, what if that happened? And I've always found that I found this with relationships, actually. I always found that I had this conversation, funny enough, today with someone that I know from after like a bad breakup that I had, when I met a new girl and things were going really well, I was like, this was meant to happen. The thing in my life that happened before, that was meant to happen so I could end up here because this is better. And then, a year, 2 years down the line, when that didn't work out, I would then look back and think, and you were back in that moment again. And then you'd meet another girl when you weren't in that moment. So I think from that analogy, I kind of got when things are going right, everything's great. Everything's rosy in the garden when things are going right. It's when things start going a little bit pear shaped in your life that you start looking back. You start not reminiscing, but looking back and thinking, oh, that was great. What I had there was great because you've overlooked straight away. You hadn't thought about that for a long period of time because something else in your life was great and now that hasn't worked out. So you then look back at the last time you was happy. And I think we do that a lot in relationships. We're constantly looking back after things go wrong until such point of where there's so many layers between your looking back, you then forget what you used to look back to, and you start looking back to a couple after that where you was really happy for a period of time again. Now, obviously, as you get older, it's really interesting that you work all your life to build up this, this house. And I say savings. I've got no savings, so I don't know if anyone else is lucky to have savings. But everything that I've got is in my house. That's everything I've got. It's there, and the equity that's in my house, I can never get. And I was thinking the other day, when am I ever going to see this money? At what stage am I going to ever be able to get this money out? Or are we just doing all this so our kids can have it which is fine. I'd give my heart to Zach in an instant without even blinking. But you do think, I'm never really going to enjoy this, am I? Or when am I going to get the money out of this? Because I don't want to be getting the money out of this when I'm 70 and I'm not able to get upstairs that easily. I'm not allowed to, not be able to go out for runs in the morning like I used to, and do all the things that I can do now, and go out and enjoy the things that make going to work every day. You think, well, if I go to work today, because it's a monotonous wheel, wasn't it? Work. You're sort of going every day, and you think, what? The only reason I'm doing this is because I need to pay bills. I need to pay a mortgage, and I need to get money. So in order to get money, I need to go to work. And don't get me wrong, I like my job, but would I do it quite happily? Yes, I would. I love the holidays. I love the holiday times from my job, and I think it'd be great to do this all the time. And I could fill my time quite easily, I think. And I'm not one of those guys that wants to play golf, because every guy that I've ever spoke to that says, yeah, once I retire, I'm going to play golf every day. After the first 2 weeks, they're bored stiff. I know at work myself. I see guys that come back, or women that come back. It's just, some of them just look lost now, because I don't know what else they've got in their life where all the things that they wanted to do when they retire, they either find out, one, they can't afford to do them because it's bloody expensive. When you're not at work and you've not got money coming in, you're aware that you've got this amount of money that you can't go past. You know what it's like when you go on holiday. You're constantly spending money. So if you're on a holiday all the time and you've got you've got no money coming in, you're constantly just shelling out money all of the time. It probably it's probably quite expensive to be retired, unless you're very, very fortunate to have the money and go traveling all of the time, and then that's great. But then does that get boring? If you're doing these things all of the time, does it then lose the appeal of doing it? You know, I I always remember a story from when I'm younger that someone told me, and it's a well-known analogy that I'm going to tell you again. Was this guy that got up every day, and he went to work, and he saw this guy sitting under a tree reading a book. And he got his guy's like lazy guy, just reading a book, just reading his book. And he's going out to work and he's making money, and he moves house and gets a bigger house, but he still sees the guy sitting under the tree reading a book. And then years later, his life moved on, a bigger house, nicer car, still sees this tree guy sitting under a tree reading a book. And he gets out of the car one day and he says, "Look, what have you done with your life?" He said, "What are you doing?" And he said, take me, for instance. I started on this house and I'm on that house now. I've got this car and I've got this family. He said, and the guy under the tree said, "Yeah, but what are you doing it for?" And he said, "Because one day I'm going to retire." And the guy says, "So what are you going to do then?" The guy says, "I'm going to sit under a tree and read a book." And that always made me laugh. And I always thought that. But surely that's a great idea. But is it only a great idea when you're in the car going to work each day? Because you look at it and you think, I'd love to be doing that. I want to be doing that. But if you've got to do it every day, does it become boring? Does that life become boring of just, doing that every day? Now, amongst these sliding door moments, for me, every time I look back at moments in my life, like I've shared with you, once you have kids, it all changes, because you wouldn't swap that moment for the world, because you realize, well, actually, if I went back and I took a different path, I wouldn't have my son or I wouldn't have my daughter, let's say. And if I did, they wouldn't be the same person. They'd be a different version of them, because they'd be slightly different. And you can never imagine, once you've got your own kids, you can never, ever imagine having a different kid. Kids, yes, but not the one that, or the two, or the three, or the four, how many have you got? They're your kids. And you wouldn't want to change any one of them. So you'd want all those kids again. And you realize that if that sliding door moment came and you stepped on that train, on that plane, different job, whatever it may be, you wouldn't have the kids that you've got now. So would you change that? And they could have been kids that you had in an awful relationship, in a great relationship, whatever it may be. But the fact is, you'd have different kids if you had kids at all. And I always think this. I always think back to when Zach's mum and myself had Zach, and that didn't work out. And we, you know, I do look back now and think, if I hadn't have had Zach then, would I have kids at all? Would I have ever had Zach? And would I have had all those moments that, have been the best part of my life? So are sliding door moments just something you look back on like an old girlfriend or an old boyfriend where they seemed really great because it was good at the time, but it's not where you are now? And there's also the thing, and I forget the ending of the film actually, but I'm going to convince myself now that this is how it ended. Do you think that no matter what path you take, you'll end up in the same place eventually of where you're meant to be? And do you think that your life is mapped out? And it's a little bit like a sat nav. You'll put in your destination and it will give you different routes. One will be horrific and you can be stuck in traffic for 2 or 3 hours on the M25 or the A1, whatever it may be, but you'll eventually get to your destination. Or is one country roads where you'll see great scenery. You might go a bit further, but it'd be a fantastic drive. It'd be nice and easy. You can have the windows down and play your music, but you'll end up in the final destination. Or is it one that's a little bit of both? It's a bit rocky. You go over a few hills. You got to go through a few, bit of chaos, but you'll end up in the same place. So do you think that your life is mapped out for you, or that are we just kidding ourselves that we have choices? Do we actually think that we make choices, or are those choices already made? And I'm a great believer of when you look back at your life, you can't change it. And if you ever went back, you make the same choices again. And I've said this 2 or 3 times. I think everyone, if they went back in their life, would make exactly the same choices again, because you make choices based on what you know at the time. And no one intentionally makes a bad choice on purpose. They just make the best choice that they can at their time. So I never look back on things that I've done and thought I could have done that better. And yes, probably in hindsight I could, but I know that if I went back again, I'd do the same mistake again. So I think your mistakes are always consistent. You'll always make those same mistakes if you went back. So you can only ever choose at the time. So you can't ever go back retrospectively. So let me know what you think. Do you think that your life is mapped out? Do you ever look back at a girl or a guy and think, I wonder what would happen if I'd have stuck with them? Or is it a case of you look at your kids now and think, I wouldn't change this for the world. For whatever I've been through, it could have been awful, but I've got these 2 kids, 1 kid, 5 kids, 10 kids, and I wouldn't change any of them. And I would go through all of that again just to have this. And also, if you're younger, are you at that point in your life, in your 20s, where you're wondering now whether to buy or rent? Do you get on the property ladder, or do you rent a place and give yourself freedom to move around? Personally, the advice I gave Zach, and we were talking about this the other day. I said, listen, if you've got money and you can buy somewhere as an investment, but rent it out and then rent yourself, because then you can do both. You've got somewhere where you've invested your money and you're making money on it, and then you've got somewhere that you're renting where you've got the freedom to go. And actually, I said to him, mate, you don't need to rent, just stay with me, because that's the whole reason I made all these choices in the first place. So you've got the freedom of choice to choose what you want to do. Anyway, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this week about sliding doors and sliding doors moments, and looking back at moments in life where you think it might have gone a different way. So let me know your thoughts, let me know your feelings on it all, and give me your sliding door moments. Thank you for listening to 50 Shades in Grey. Thank you for joining us. And remember, you are where you are now, and you can't change that. So all you can do is look forward. Take care, guys.